Hi, welcome to the Phil's Virtual Sewing Club. My name's Cindy.
And I'm Diane. Today what we're going to do is we're going to work on and learn how to create a cake mix recipe using this particular product and turn it into a product or a project that looks like this.
Let's get started.
Today to create our project, I want to point out some of the items that we're going to be using to create this project. Very first thing we're going to use is this rotating cutting mat. This is great, and you can see as I rotate it here what the action is going to be, and it's going to be great for cutting apart our paper pieces while using the cake mix recipe cards. That's what they call these. Okay, and then I'm going to also use the Panasonic iron that's wireless, so it's charging on this little base right now. And then I'm going to use the rotary grid cutting tools here, along with our rotary cutter. And then over here, to hold everything together while I'm sewing, I'm going to use these clips. These clips are awesome. So if you have never used these clips, this project might be a good time to utilize them. And then for pressing purposes, I use the Best Press. And then this here little unit is just like a spritzer. So you have the Best Press, and you can buy this in larger quantities. And then if you want to, you could get this cute little handy dandy spritzer tool, and it works really, really nice when you're spritzing. Then for the actual project itself, I purchased a bunch of layer cakes. And what layer cakes are, they're 10-inch square pieces, okay? And with this, I'm going to kind of page down and determine the fabrics that I'm going to use. So I want like a contrast. So I want like a dark and then a lighter color so that there's a really nice contrast. In this particular layer cake, there's a lot of lights and darks and so forth. And then here's a different layer cake. It's got florals and so forth, but they're lighter. They're spring colors and so forth. I'm going to choose this red because I really like red and black together. Okay, first thing is I'm going to place my darker colored section on the bottom facing up, because what I'm going to do with the contrasting piece, which in the directions, if you were to read through these directions completely, and you should, it says to put the lighter fabric on the top. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm calling this my lighter fabric for this project. So I'm going to line up the edges like this, and I'm going to tear off, or I've already torn off a section here, and then this is what the piece looks like. So you're going to place that on top of your little sandwich, okay, and you're going to make sure that it's kind of even with the edges all the way around so that you have a good equidistance from around, so that you have, when you sew this, that you catch all the seams, or all the fabrics I should say. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little dudes and I'm going to clip them together. Now what I'm doing is I'm clipping the back fabric with the lighter colored fabric and then the actual template on top of it. So I'm going to put approximately 4 on each side as such. And it holds those down together so that while you're sewing that there's no shifting of the fabrics, because you're sewing your 3 layers together like that. As I go around, I make sure I catch all of them. Like Just a few more clips to go on. And of course, you're going to be removing the clips while you sew because your sewing line are indicated on the templates. And I'll show you that when we get to the sewing machine. So we've got this all set, all ready to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, if, you know, in this situation, I would do another sandwich section with your dark piece and your light piece, and then your pattern section, which is your template, okay, on the top. So do 2 of those, so that way you can take them both over to the sewing machine at the same time. That way you're not jumping up and down, you know, get your other sections. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our sewing machine for straight stitch sewing. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is power it up and then come over here and select the stitch. It's 1-03. That's the stitch that we're going to be utilizing today for this project. Okay, and of course we're using the J foot, or if you have this clear foot, it's a 1/4 inch clear foot, and it's going to work great when you're trying to keep that the sewing line right between your area right there, which is the center of the foot itself, and that's where the needle is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to attach this snap-on foot to the machine. Machine has been threaded with a cotton thread. You know, you're putting a lot of work into your project, so for cotton fabrics, I like to use cotton thread on the top and also in the bobbin as well. So if you don't have your bobbin wound, make sure you wind a full bobbin as well. For this project, since we're going to be sewing over paper, I want to make sure that the stitch length is very close together. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take it down to about 1.6 millimeters in my length. Okay. Now what that's going to do when we're stitching is it's going to allow the paper to be torn away very, very easily and slickly without a lot of mess going on. Okay. So with that set at 1.6, I'm going to look at my paper piece then, my template, and turn it around and watch or look for the start position. The start is over here. It's got a star by it. So that's the side we're going to start sewing on. So we're going to start there and come around here to this point and come down, following the arrows that are pointing. So you're going to go in the direction that those arrows are pointing. Then we're going to come over here. I'm going to cut the thread. I'm going to come back over here then at this point and come up and down and around. And we're going to repeat that until we have all of the areas sewn where the arrows are right there. And then you're going to end over at this point. Okay, another thing that I want to just point out to you is this cute little stiletto tool. This little tool is great for pointing and keeping your fabric, you know, in a line with your needle and so forth. So this is a great little tool for that. So if you're interested, you know. So we're gonna start all the engines here. Okay, so up here's your starting point, and what I'm going to do is lower the presser foot so that that stitch line is centered right down the center of that foot, okay? And you're going to want to make sure that your clips are away from the needle or away from the edge of the foot as well, because you don't want that to interfere. So then you're just going to start sewing. One other thing, since the machine is going so slow here, I do have a speed control. I'm going to set this at its limit, so I'm going to slide this all the way over, and then I'm going to continue. And I'm going to make sure that the paper or that stitch line is right down the center of where that needle is being placed. And when I get close to the center point there, it's got the square right here, you can see, and it's right under the needle right now. That's how and where I'm going to pivot. Okay, so I'm ready to start sewing. Make sure my clips are away from the foot. And you're just going to guide that, just like we did in the first pass. Now I stitch off and I cut my thread. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these clips and rotate it. And on the other side, lower my presser foot. And then I'm going to start stitching, following those arrows again. If you use like a 75 11 needle, that works out well as well for this particular project for sewing. Remove the clips again. And I move down my clip so it won't bump into the presser foot. And sew the next or the third side. Okay, pivot at the center. As you go around here, you'll need less and less of these clips because it's being sewn together. So then we're going to do the next side. Okay, and this is the last section. Make sure that's all moved in. Your clips. And there's no need to backspace at this point because those edges are going to be trimmed away. Okay, rotate, move our clips. This time I'm going to take them all off, the remaining clips. Okay, we're done. You can see on the back side where our stitch lines are. And right down here is where you're going to be cutting it away. So now we're going to take this back over to our cutting table and we're going to complete the next step with these directions. Okay, over at the cutting table, I placed my little sewn section on top of this rotating cutting mat. Okay, because now what we're going to do is we're going to cut away the areas that are needed to make our little quilt pieces. Okay. Now, if you read the cake mix recipe, and this is recipe number 4, okay, I just want to point a few things out to you. It'll make 8 sections. Okay, you can either cut them 3 3/4 inch, and this is the finished size, or 4 by 4 size. So, and in this particular project, I cut mine 4 by 4. So 4 inches by 4 inches square, okay? So let's get started doing that. So I'm going to take my straight edge ruler. If you look on the template itself, you'll see the cutting line. The first part that we're going to cut out is the outer edge. So, and that is the solid line all the way around. Now that's where I'm talking about the 3 3/4 by the 4 by 4. So if you use the outer line, that will become the 4 by 4 size, and that's the line we're going to create. Unless, of course, you want the 3 3/4 inch square section for a smaller project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is line this up along the outer edge, and with my cutting tool, a lot of times I'll tell you to make sure your blade is really sharp. But in this situation, since we're cutting through paper, when you're cutting through paper, it tends to dull the blade. So I'm going to suggest using a blade that's already been used, rather than a brand new blade, because if you use a brand new blade, it's going to dull that blade up right away. Okay, and notice how I rotate my cutting mat around. This way there's no distortion when you're cutting your little squares out. Everything remains in the same position. Okay, so this is the first step. So cut the last edge. And of course, you're holding down pretty securely so that it doesn't shift when you're cutting. Now, next thing I'm going to do, I don't know, there's different ways you can go about this, or different sides you can cut first and so forth. But I'm going to cut from corner to corner. I'm going to move this out of my way a little bit because it's interfering with my placement. Okay. In this situation, I'm going to place it on that center diagonal line. You can see that right here. It's the same as over here, but I'm lining my edge up along that center line. Go ahead and cut through that section. Okay, without moving anything, okay, I'm going to rotate my mat again. Place my straight edge along that center diagonal line. Okay. Now we've got 2 more cuts we have to do. The next 2 cuts will be along this line right there, and then that line to finish it off. So I'm going to place my ruler on that center line. And notice nothing is shifted too much except for there, but we can always move that back in. There we go. Rotate the mat. Go ahead and place it on that last cross-haired line. Hold down tightly so nothing shifts. And at this point, I recommend that you go kind of slow with the cutting so that in case it does shift, that you don't cut into your square. Now what I'm going to do, separate my pieces, and you can see how it looks. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pieces over to my little pressing mat. And I'm using that wool pressing mat that works really nice for this project. That way you're not running back and forth to your ironing board, as I sometimes do. We're not going to remove the paper yet until after we do our pressing, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press my seam all in the same direction towards the darker area. So I'm going to make sure that my red section is on the top, open it out, and this is all done while that paper is on the back side of the template. And we're going to do that for all of these sections. Oops, I'm going to go this way. And you get such a nice seam as well if you leave that paper on, because it knows where the edge of that paper is, and it just keeps it all together. Okay, we're going to just move these out a little bit. And on this pressing mat, I don't know if you've noticed it, but what I put underneath there was a brick, or this is like a floor tile. And if I were to use steam, which I'm going to be using steam a little later, but not at this point, but if you were to use steam, then the steam won't go through and warp your cutting mat, which that would be disappointing if you warped it. So this way we won't get any warpage, because what happens with this wool cutting mat, the steam goes through it. And that's a good thing. And I'm going to continue here, folding these sections over, pressing them nice. One thing I've got to say about pressing is you can never press too much. Pressing to me is like one of the most important things in the quilting process. And yeah, you're going to say, well, isn't stitching? Well, stitching is, but you know what? If you press your project sections securely from the very beginning, you're going to notice a difference in the way your quilts are going to look. And then your seams will line up a lot easier too, as well. I'm going to put that over there. Almost done here. Whoop, I don't want to bump that. And our last one. Okay. It doesn't hurt to go over them again. Like I said, pressing is like one of the best things you can do for your quilts, to make those seams line up. Okay. So now the next thing we're going to do is remove the paper. We no longer need this paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over just like what I did here. Hold my nail on my fingernail right in the center. And then I'm going to pull it apart. And this is why you need that stitch length to be at 1.6, because then it removes all of those paper sections without making too much of a mess, because when you're doing paper piecing, sometimes it can be quite messy. And to me, this is kind of the fun part. Get to take away all that and get to see how pretty my quilt sections or pieces look. Okay, going to continue and do all of them in that same fashion. If you fold it over a little bit too, it helps to remove that paper. And if you have a little piece like this, go ahead, remove it. You don't want that left behind. So forth. Put them all in the same direction. Okay, I'll remove those a little later. Okay, but so the next step that you're going to do is you're going to grab hold of your little scissors, and you're going to trim away these little nodes, or whatever you want to call them, off of each of your sections. Like that. Okay, you're going to do that on both edges, because that sometimes interferes with the placement when you're sewing it together. Okay, back at the cutting table here. What I want to show you is there's so many options for layout of your little blocks, and I just, one other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned is that I had already cut these and sewed these together, so I've got different fabrics now. But you know, different fabrics is showing you more options, and that's always a good thing. Okay, so what I did is I used a different fabric. I used the floral print here for that I had put together as well. So it just, you know, they look really well too together. But so then what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the different possibilities that you can utilize and work with. Here are 4 possibilities for 4 orientations of those little pattern pieces. And I'll tell you what, and there's a gazillion more, okay? So just, you know, what I did is I found myself just rotating and playing around with the blocks. And then I came up with this pattern here, and I really like it. So this is the one I'm going to stick with. But just so that you know as well that, you know, you can turn these and have a completely different look. So if I were to just rotate this as such, I've got my black areas pointing to the corners rather than inward. Okay, and anything goes with this. Okay, that's all I got to say. And it's like, and then I could have actually taken one of these pieces and put it up there like that. That way I've got those same fabrics together. But in this particular one, I wanted it to be every other one. So that's kind of why I settled with this, you know. But you can, you know, anything goes, like I said. You can really change up the orientation or the rotation of any of these blocks. And just by one rotation, it's going to make a completely different look. So I say at this point in time, have fun with it, because, you know, I had a lot of fun when I was trying to figure out an orientation. Now this one is wrong, so I'm going to have to come back in here. There's something different here. Or look at this. I created a completely different pattern again. Okay, so here, I think this was like that. Okay, where I've got my 2 blacks pointing inward on all 4 sides, and my colors, and this created this nice square. Okay, so when sewing this together, okay, I recommend that you be very gentle with it, because when we cut this on the bias. So this fabric right now, and I'm trying to be really gentle so I don't distort it, but this is the bias, and you can really distort this fabric, okay? So we want to make sure that when we're handling it, that we're very gentle with it, that we don't tug and pull, you know, when we're sewing it together, even when we're placing our pieces together, okay? So what I like to do is I like to do it line by line. I take my pieces like this, fold them over, okay? And then I'll take it to the sewing machine. So I know this is the area I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam here, 1/4 inch seam here, bring it back, and then when everything is said and done, after these are sewn together, then I'll have 2 pieces. Then this center part will be sewn together, okay? So right now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to show you how you can utilize some of these other spray or devices, or not devices, but different products like this Best Press to make sure that you get that nice flat seam, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just spray one up here and these two, okay? Take my iron, okay, and set it on high. Here we go. It's already been heated, so I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, press that out. And at this point in time, that's when this brick underneath here, that tile underneath is really helpful, okay? Because like I said, that moisture is going to go downward, and we don't want to ruin our mat. Now, another little device that I find really, really helpful is one of these clappers, okay? What you can do with this is put it on the area that you just ironed, okay? And what it'll do is, and you're going to press down on that because that's setting that seam as well, okay? And this is really a good thing to use after you've sewn some of your other seams. So you may want to just use that after you've sewn or some of your seams together. And what happens as well is some of the moisture absorbs up into this wood, and so it removes that moisture as well. And it does a really nice job with those seams. Okay, so set that aside. So now what we're going to do is now that we've rearranged everything to our liking, we're going to go ahead and take this over to our sewing machine, just as is. Okay, over here at the sewing machine, we're ready to sew. Okay, but before we do that, I just want to flip this over. This is how you're going to flip them so that they line up. And then use your clips to hold them in place. Okay. Now over here at the machine, I want to change my stitch length from 1.6 to 2.0. So you can go up or down. Oops, this doesn't work for that, but this does. Okay, so set it at 2.0. That's to me that's a good stitch length for piecing your sections together. Okay, so here we go. To take the first section, line it up, and there we go. Let's stitch it away. Make sure you have the edge of the foot aligned with the edge of the fabric sections. And when you get close to the seam, make sure you lift it or move that seam fabric underneath the presser foot, okay? It makes for a much nicer seam, okay? Go ahead and cut it. Okay. Then on this section, what I'm going to do, since it's getting kind of bulky at the edges, so what I'm going to recommend you do at this point in time is press the seam open. Okay, so here's our iron. Press that open. There we go. Take the other section right next to it. Clip it together so that everything stays in place. Remove your clips as you go along. Okay, open it up and repeat the same process. Ironing. Helps with this little tool to open up that seam. Go kind of finger press it a little bit with your iron. And go ahead and iron it flat. There we go. Okay, this was over here in this corner as such. And make sure your orientation is correct as well. That's right. So then we're going to sew the center section together using your clips again to make sure that it stays in place. You may want to take a look as well to make sure that your seams are lining up at the bottom here, and they are. Okay. There we go. Sure again that seam is, or that fabric is under the pressing foot. Go ahead and cut that. And iron that section flat too. Then after we get it ironed flat, you'll be able to see how well that those all lined up. Finger press. Iron it flat with the iron. There we go. Let's flip it over. And you can see how close that was with the lining up the points. Okay, that's your first row. You're going to continue in the same fashion with each of the rows, sewing them together, 2 sections together, 2 sections, and then the 2 sections in the center together. And then the 3rd row, and then the 4th row as well. Okay. Hi, I hope you've enjoyed this project, creating this beautiful pillow using the cake mix recipe. And this one is recipe 4, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but this is recipe 4. There's so many different options that you can use with this particular recipe. I mean, Cindy, she can show you the pillow she created here.
Yes, I created this pillow, and with this, I was challenged with a one-way design. So to keep the lettering oriented so that they were able to be read, I had to move things around and still come up with the design I was happy with. And I didn't make a pillow out of this yet, but with this, with the leftovers from this, I was still able to create yet another pattern and still maintain the correct orientation of the lettering. So it's just a matter of playing with it. It's like a puzzle, and you move the pieces around and you get it to where you like it and you're happy with it. But it's a lot of fun. What do you think, Diane?
I actually have a home for that. I could put this out on my porch, and I think it would look beautiful there, you know, with all the bright, vibrant colors that are going on with it. And the thing about this here particular cake mix recipe, there's so many different orientations that you can utilize.
I love this table runner.
Yes, and I made this table runner too, which, you know, is still showing a different orientation for all of our blocks, using different fabrics again as well. In the video, you know, I use different fabrics, but, you know, and that's just to show you that anything will work, and it'll turn out beautiful, you know.
All the points are really nice.
Yes, yes.
That paper helping to stabilize those bias edges was really a plus for me.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, after you're done with it, you can finish it off by quilting it, you know, and you can use that, any type of a quilting stitch that you so choose. But
you can make a full-size quilt with this.
Oh, you definitely could. I think this will make, if I remember reading that correctly, it'll make up to a king-size quilt. You know, so there's a lot of different pages in here, and I think that there was, let me think here, there's excuse me, 44 recipe sheets. So you can make 44 blocks this size which is, I think it was ended up being like 16.5 inches or somewhere in that neighborhood. So, I mean, yeah, you could definitely do a quilt with this, you know, and still be very happy. I felt like choosing the fabrics was like the best part. You know?
It was fun.
Yeah.
And, you know, using that rotary cutter, the mat that rotates.
Oh, this one,
I found that very helpful because I have, you know, when you start moving things around, I think you start losing it.
Most
and it
definitely.
just really makes the process much easier and quicker using a rotating mat. And I didn't find myself fussing with the different pieces.
I know, that's just it, because with these pieces, like I said in the project notes, you know, or when I was filming it, it's cut on the bias, and so you don't want to shift your pieces too much, you know, otherwise they'll become distorted, and I don't think, you know, you don't want that.
Right.
Since you put all the effort into it, you want to make sure all your points end up right on.
Right.
You know?
And the quarter inch clear foot really gave me a great visibility.
Yes.
That's a fairly new foot, and I really have been finding that that's my go-to quilting foot.
Yes, it was great, you know, lining up that foot right down the center on that line, you know.
And the clear foot allows you the visibility to see those arrows.
Most
perfectly.
definitely, most definitely. So, all of these products, you know, that we've shown here are all, you know, at the Larry and Annette's store in beautiful downtown Washington, Missouri.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yes, yes.
So until next time, if you need any supplies, contact Larry or Annette, and stay tuned next month for our Phil's Virtual Sewing Club.
Thank you.